So first we're going to make a stock for our sauce. I'm going to use shrimp here because we just bought some large shrimp and we had those on hand. So you're going to preheat your oven to 400 degrees, place the shells on top of an aluminum foil lined pan and bake them for about 30 minutes. You want the shells to be crispy because you're basically dehydrating the shells. It's going to concentrate that seafood flavor, and that's what you're doing by baking your shells to be able to build your stock. Once finished baking, you can remove the baked shells from the oven and then add them to a steamer pan or a stock pot. I put them in a steamer pan because it's easier to drain out all of the shells once you add your liquids. It's just easier to strain those. Next, we're going to add some water. I use bottled water for my stock. I think it tastes better. And then you're going to use as much as you need to cover the shells in your stock pot. You can also use some seafood stock if you want to intensify the flavor. I use this brand called Bar Harbor, and it's pretty good seafood stock that you can use to build your stock. Or if you only have one seafood shell that you're using to make stock, this is a good additive. I also add some chicken stock, just a regular chicken stock, probably one with no sodium. That'll work best. And then I add in some vegetable cut-offs like celery ends, carrots, onions, etc., along with a few leaves of bay leaf and maybe a garlic clove or two. You're going to just let that boil and then let all those good flavors develop. While your stock is boiling, go ahead and start building your sauce. In a large stock pot, saute the trinity. That's onions, bell peppers, and celery, chopped up nicely. And you can put that in a little bit of olive oil until the vegetables are translucent. Once that's done, lower your fire to very, very low, and then let's start making our roux. We're going to be doing a dry roux. You're going to put about a cup of all-purpose flour into a dry skillet, of course. The black cast iron skillets are the best. However, whatever you have is going to work here. Just have to make sure and watch it. Go ahead and turn your fire up to medium-high and then start stirring the flour with a whisk. Continue to stir the flour until it gets brown. It's going to get darker when you add your stock to it. So we're going to finish off our roux by slowly adding the stock you just finished to your browned dry flour in the skillet. Be very, very careful here because it's extremely hot and it does splatter. Add the liquid to the flour a little at a time until you get to the consistency of a roux. And you're going to know when it's ready, when you get to it. Expect to see a few small lumps in there, but that's okay. They're all going to cook out at the end. When you get your roux to the right consistency, stir in a full can of tomato paste and a half stick of butter. Whisk that all together. Then you're going to take some fresh Roma tomatoes. You're going to run those through the food processor and then add those processed, chopped up tomatoes into your sauce base. I also like to add a little bit of pureed tomatoes or crushed tomatoes as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just add those into my stock pot where I had my sauteed vegetables. Next, transfer your roux to the stock pot with the vegetables and the pureed tomatoes. Add 2 or 3 cups of seafood stock to your stock pot and slowly bring your contents to a boil. Once it starts boiling, go ahead and lower the fire to simmer. This is the beginning of my crawfish bisque, the sauce portion. Next, we're going to begin adding the meat portion of the bisque. You're going to start again with the trinity and some butter, and we got some bell peppers, onions, and celery here. We're going to saute those again until they're just translucent, and then we're going to put a little bit of that sauteed trinity on the side because we're going to need that for our actual crawfish stuffing. Usually, we would be using fresh crawfish tails, and because that's what we would have collected during crawfish season when we all sat around and peeled crawfish and collected all the large heads. Because it's November and we don't really have ready access to crawfish tails, I'm going to go ahead and use the ones that are pre-peeled and bagged. Be sure that the ones that you use are from Louisiana. You're going to empty 2 or 3 bags of crawfish tails into the skillet with some butter and that trinity sauté that we put aside. We're also sprinkling some crawfish boil, that Zatarain's powder. It's really good. I use it to season a lot of things, especially if I haven't had the pleasure of getting my seafood directly from a seafood boil. It's really cool. Then I'm going to add some dried garlic, not a lot, and I'm also going to add some Tony Chachere's. Also some red pepper flakes, that's going to give it a nice little kick. And I'm also going to add some cayenne pepper. Again, that's just going to give it a little bit of a kick, and you want to be light-handed with that. We'll also add some dry parsley flakes. We're also going to add a little bit of salt, and of course, your salt to taste later on. So we're going to saute that crawfish meat real nice and good. And this is going to be twofold. We're going to grind some of this up, and we're also going to leave some of the tails whole to put in our sauce. When you're finished sauteing the crawfish, go ahead and transfer half of these tails into your already waiting sauce base that you have simmering. The rest of it we're going to grind up and make our crawfish bisque. The remaining tails, we're going to put those into a food processor. As you can see, I've already been chopping some fresh green vegetables in that food processor. Once that's done, we're going to take the chopped up meat and we're going to add that to our simmering sauce. It's just going to add another layer of flavor with the crawfish and all of the great seasonings that we sauteed in there. So now you pretty much got your bisque done and ready to continue to cook. You're going to add some half and half there and also raise the heat to bring it to a boil. It's almost looking like a little meat sauce there. My sauce is really thick and it's just chock full of meat. So, there's that. After coming to a boil, remember to return it to a simmer. Make sure and cover your pan. While the bisque is cooking, you're going to open the remaining bags of your crawfish tails. Again, make sure they're sourced from Louisiana. And we're going to saute those with a little bit of the sauteed vegetables that we had earlier. I'll add that in with some butter and a little bit more of the crawfish boil from Zatarain's. I really love that, actually. It's really a cool spice if you want to just add a little extra kick and you don't want to use, Tony Chachere's or something like that. Just go ahead and use a little Zatarain's crawfish boil, the dry one, and sprinkle that on. Again, you're going to put those remaining sauteed vegetables in the pan and saute the rest of your crawfish there. This is what we're going to be using for our stuffed heads. I'm going to add the fresh parsley to this, and it just makes the stuffing so fresh tasting. Also going to add some green onions as well. I've chopped all of these in our food processor. Again, it adds such a good fresh taste to our crawfish stuffing. And I'll be adding a little bit more, too, at the end. I've also added a little bit of the chopped celery, and that's basically for some texture. And I'm going to take a little bit of my sauce that's been cooking, and I'm going to also add that in with my crawfish tails. All that really is going to do is create a consistency of flavor, with your stuffing and your sauce. You can add a little bit more of the Tony Chachere's here, but be careful because you're going to be adding to the breading. I'm also adding some more dry red peppers and a little bit more salt. Again, be careful because you're going to be adding those breadcrumbs, and the breadcrumbs may be salty if they're seasoned, and so just be careful with that. Once we finish sauteing the last bit of crawfish tails, we're going to separate out about a third of those crawfish tails and put them to the side. Go ahead and preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Now we're going to start making our stuffing. I use Leidenheimer's French bread just to make like some really fresh breadcrumbs. So go ahead and break that up into some pieces and then run that through your food processor to get the breadcrumbs. Then we're going to add to this breadcrumb a mixture of your basic seasonings. We're doing some parsley, we're going to do some celery, we're doing some green onions, some dry red pepper, and also some Tony Chachere's as well. And this is just going to really flavor up your breadcrumbs. I'm also going to make sure and stir that up so that it's all mixed in together. Now we're going to add our ground up crawfish tails. Again, this was seasoned with the sauce and with the fresh vegetables, and we just ran it through a food processor, similar to what we did for the sauce. We're going to add a little bit of heavy cream and then also add a little bit more butter. Then we're going to whisk one large egg and just go ahead and toss that into the stuffing mixture and mix that all up. You want it to be the consistency of a good stuffing, a little bit moister than that, however. This particular stuffing is going to be a lot lighter than your traditional heavy stuffing, so if you want to make it heavier, just add more breadcrumbs as you go along. But you really don't want it to be too stiff if you want to maintain a lot of that moisture. I'm going to add a bit more breadcrumbs to get the consistency that I like, and then stir this thing up really good, get it all mixed in together evenly. Next, I'm going to put that to the side and prepare my heads. I bought some that are already cleaned, got them from Perino's on the West Bank. They usually have the best ones, and they're pretty clean. But I want you to know that you're going to have to clean them further once you get them home. I like to boil them again in some water with a tablespoon of baking soda and a little crab oil, and that'll give you a little bit of flavor in those shells. And make sure you take off, the eyes and the antennas and all that stuff. I mean, that stuff is not supposed to be in your crawfish bisque. When you get ready to stuff the heads, they're going to have some membranes or even debris left inside some of the heads from when they were peeling them and taking all of the insides out. So just go through each of your heads and clean all of that stuff out. Again, especially if you're buying them already clean. I literally go through each and every one of them and try to clean them out as much as possible. And again, when you get those heads back, you can boil them with a little bit of baking soda, just like a teaspoonful, and some water. Boil them, and that'll make them nice and pliable and easier to work with. And that's also will help you with cleaning out any of that extra debris. Again, please, no eyes left on the crawfish bisque, please. In one bowl, the whole tails we sauteed just a minute ago. Place that there, and then on in another bowl where we have our stuffing mixture that we made with the breadcrumbs and all of the other fresh seasoning. And we're going to need an aluminum pan or a cookie sheet. If you don't have an aluminum one, just line a cookie sheet with some aluminum foil and spray it with some Pam. We also have our cleaned and ready to go crawfish heads. And now what you're going to do with these crawfish heads is you're going to use your thumb and your middle finger, and you're going to kind of squeeze this thing and hold it open. Place one of these crawfish tails in the inside of his head, and then you're going to use your spoon, just a regular teaspoon, to go ahead and load up that crawfish head with the stuffing. And then it's ready to go. I literally put one crawfish tail in each one of my crawfish heads, and I use this cool little spoon. It has a little scalloped edge, and it really does help. I don't know why, but it works really well when I'm stuffing crawfish. I think I've got enough for about 60 heads here. Squeeze it open with your thumb and your middle finger. Lay in your crawfish tail. Then load up your stuffing using your special stuffing spoon. Shape them up nice. They're supposed to look like a little, like bullets or boulets, however you say that. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can quickly run through some of these, and that's it. Once you've got all of your crawfish tails stuffed and lined up and ready to go, we're going to just sprinkle a little bit of the breadcrumbs on top of our finished stuffed crawfish heads, because that's what we want to do here. We want to make sure that they have like a little crunch and they're able to hold up under all of the weight of that sauce, right? We want them to kind of stand out. All right, so these are ready to go into the middle of the oven, which is set to 375. You're going to put it in there for about 15 minutes. And make sure you don't overcook those, or undercook them for that matter. You want to take them out when they are nice and brown on the top. Don't forget to sprinkle a little bit of breadcrumbs on the top, and that'll help with your browning. And now we're ready to plate them up, and here is your crawfish bisque.